then. Honor those of you who were able to get here right at the beginning. So welcome everyone. My name's Annette Marcus and I use she and her pronouns, and I'm really delighted to say that I know most of you who are here, and those of you I don't know, I hope I'll get a chance to connect with you. I am the policy manager with the Oregon Alliance to Prevent Suicide and work closely with Jen Fraga, who is kind of being the magic behind the scenes here today. And Jen coordinates our youth engagement and communication and a whole lot of other things for the Alliance. Our quarterly, you can go to the next slide. So our agenda today is basically just to welcome everyone. I want to give you a little bit of a policy update, and also just, I don't know about you, but I've had quite the busy May and April, so I want to take a moment to breathe so we could all kind of center. As we know, when we talk about suicide, there's often tender topics, even though many of us swim around in this topic every day, still taking a moment for self-care. And then I'm really excited to have Deb Darmada from OHA provide us with an overview of the ASIPP, which has been officially published, woo-hoo-hoo, yay, and or at least softly published. You'll have to tell us the difference between a hard launch and a soft launch, Deb. So it's had a soft launch. And then after that, we're going to hear from just one of the most incredible community resource people I know, Laura Rose Massaras, who's going to share with us a resource that she's developed called Pure Galaxy, and also point us to some other key resources that I think you'll find really helpful as you're working with individuals in your counties. And so that's going to be it for today. Next slide. So before we started, I just wanted to give everyone a moment just to get present in the room. You take a moment to just like look around where you are. You may be in your office, you may be at home, and notice we're going to do the 5 senses. So if you can start by noticing 5 things that you can see, just count them off in your head. 5 different things you see. 4 different things you can touch. You can touch your computer, you can touch your leg, your hair, your coffee mug, just to notice you're present in here. How about, can you hear 3 things? How about your sense of smell? When I get to the sense of smell, I usually have to like pick something up and go, oh, I'm smelling my coffee. Oh, smelling my hand. It's just interesting what we smell like. And finally, what's the taste in your mouth right now? Let's all take one big breath in and hold for a moment. And slowly let go. Thank you. Now that we're all really present in here, next slide. I just want to center us again on what the Alliance's mission and vision is. And today I will read the equity statement, partially because equity is really on my mind a lot, and it's really been central to the work that we've been doing lately with the Alliance. And we're really trying to do more than lip service to the idea of equity. And as any of you know, it's challenging to figure out where do you start. There's so many things to work on. And I think right now the Alliance is really looking at what is happening politically across the nation for LGBTQ folks, and being very aware of the intersectional kind of risk that especially places on trans folks of color. And so this is what we are working on towards equity, is to achieve our vision. We acknowledge the impact of white supremacy, institutionalized racism, and all forms of oppression. The Alliance endeavors to make Oregon a place where suicide reduction and prevention is achieved for people of all ages, races, ethnicities, abilities, gender identities, sexual orientations, socioeconomic status, nationalities, and geographic locations. And I would say for those of us who've been working on youth suicide, we're especially called to do this work right now when we have for the last 3 years had a decrease overall in the youth suicide rate in Oregon, but there has not been a similar decrease for youth of color. Youth of color have actually had, it looks like, increasing, although it's a very small number for us what I hear is that the number's too small to actually officially make trends, but if we just look at them as whole numbers, we see that there's been more deaths by youth of color and fewer deaths by white youth. And so we want to really continue to lean in and think about how we are supporting all Oregonians. Next slide, please. Just wanted to briefly remind folks that on June 6th, Coalition Mini Grant applications are due. We're very excited. We received our first one last week. We hope some of the rest of you are going to be applying, and threw this up on the wall in case any of you are part of the coalition that is not represented on here. The turquoise ones are the places where we know there are coalitions. So let us know if you exist and we don't have you on here. Next slide. So partially I did that deep breath at the beginning because I needed to calm myself. It's been kind of a wild and wacky policy year at the state legislature. We, as many of you may be aware, currently things are very much shut down at the legislature with the Republicans having walked out, and thus far there is not news about them coming back. And I think we're really trying to sort out what this is going to mean. What I can tell you is that there were hundreds of bills that were at Ways and Means and in process that will not be heard, including a number of the bills that we were working on. And honestly, I don't have a special magnifying glass into the Capitol. What I can share with you is kind of what I'm hearing from other folks working there. And it's a very odd situation because, as you may have heard, we recently had the state revenue projection, and it was extremely positive, far more positive than anyone had anticipated. State revenue projections are expected to increase through 2030, fueled by increased personal and corporate tax collections, as well as a significant increase in interest earnings from 25 million annually to 277 million this year, and growing to 350 million next year. I have to say, as somebody who is working there at the legislature, this was surprising to hear because the message that we were getting from legislators was, be very conservative in what you're asking for. We are anticipating that there's going to be less money moving forward, that we're moving into a recession. So there's kind of a dissonance between what people were expecting and what the revenue forecast has shown. What this means for you individually is Oregon has a kicker where I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this well. The kicker is set up so that if the income is beyond what the revenue forecast had included, above a certain amount, that money gets kicked back individually to Oregonians. And this next year, it'll be $5.5 billion that come back to us as individuals. And just to calculate your personal kicker, expect half back of whatever you paid in last year for the tax. Today's revenue forecast predicted the state budget writers will have an additional $1.9 billion available for 2023-25. I'm not going to go into sort of the details here, but we'll send this out with the rest of things so folks can look at this. But it's a very interesting situation and kind of a dilemma, because while action at the state legislature is mostly being pulled to a stop because of there not being able to be quorums, we're in a situation of plenty where we want to be sure that budgets get passed and that we actually support the activities that are occurring around the state. Next slide. So as an alliance, what we've done is we have gone ahead and sent an email out to everybody in the state legislature, started with the Ways and Means Committee, but have moved on to others, really with a call to action, saying, please don't let this gridlock that's happening right now keep us from funding suicide prevention. And we have called on them to at least fund it at the level that the governor's proposed, which was $7.7 million with an additional $0.6 million to ODE. We also said, please do take a look at funding crisis services 988 and mobile crisis response. If any of you are inclined at all politically to call people, to chat with your local legislators, this is the message I think we really need to be making, is that no matter what, we need to be sure that we get through this session with investments to suicide prevention and to mental health promotion. And it really does make a difference for you to call your local legislators, if you know, and we can send you a list of who they are if that's helpful at all, just to remind them that this is a priority. Next slide. Oh, that was my last one. And so let me just pause for a second and see if there's any questions before we jump into hearing from Deb. I know that's a very broad kind of policy update, and I wish I could give you more significant news on the different bills that we've pushed through, but everything's kind of in limbo right now. And any of you who are from the state or know the politics at the Capitol, if you have anything you want to add to that or additional clarification you want to add to that, you're welcome to. So thank you. Well, with that kind of brief introduction, I really am excited to pass this on to Deborah Darmada. I think, as many of you know, many people across the state came together to work with Deb on developing a 5-year adult suicide intervention and prevention plan. And we are finally moving into the period where the plan's being rolled out. And so Deb's going to share the plan with us and talk with us a little bit about next steps.
So is it okay if I share my screen, Jen, to go off of my slides?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me get this out of here. So can you see the slide without?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see the slide without my notes or anything, right?
Yeah, we just have all of the smaller slides on the left-hand side, so it's not in slideshow view for us.
No, that's not how I want it. Oh man. Let me stop sharing. Try one more thing. Okay, now you'll see it. Is that right? You can see it now?
Yep.
Okay, well, I did it. How about that? First of all, Annette had mentioned that a lot of people have worked on this, and I noticed a lot of people in the room who helped to work on this. So if you helped to work on the adult plan, could you do a thumbs up so we can all applaud you, please? Do a thumbs up if you were part of helping to develop this plan. Wonderful. So thank you, thank you to all of you, all suicide. And then the second thing is we'll kind of discuss briefly, just very briefly, the methodology behind the development of the plan. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at the actual plan. I have a link to it, so I'm going to throw it up there and we'll take a look at some of the content and mostly the maneuverability in the plan. So in terms of, oops, next slide. Sorry about that. There we go. So in terms of, if you look at 2017 through 2021, meaning that that's not just a blip in time, that's a period of 4 years. When you look at the Oregon rates of suicide and you compare the youth and the adult rates, you can see that the adults have a significantly higher rate of suicide with 25.9 per 100,000, with youth 14.4 per 100,000. So, and that is, that trend has, thank God, I guess, always been true, right? So that the adult rate is significantly higher than the youth rate. And, what we're trying to do here, we certainly are very careful to not take resources from the youth because as Annette had mentioned, I mean, actually what we're doing seems to be working. And so we don't want to pull resources, but what Annette also just mentioned is that we have a lot of money in this state and it's really time to put a concerted effort into suicide by adults. And so that's what this is about. To kind of also take a look a little more at ages in terms of age specific rates of suicide. So again, this is 2018, 2021. And this is a very, as you can see, a very busy graph. So I'm going to share with you the important things to look at here. So male is represented in dark blue with female represented in gray. And then the third one is all. So one of the first things I want you to notice is that throughout the lifespan, the suicide rate for men is significantly higher than it is for women. In terms of women, you can see that the highest rate of suicide is between the ages of 55 and 59, and with a rate of 18.0. But again, if you take a look anywhere on this graph, you can see that the rate for men is significantly higher. As men age, the suicide rate tends to go up. That is not true for women. You can see that age 80 to 84, the rate of suicide is 51 per 100,000, which is stunningly high. And when you look at a rate for Oregon, age-adjusted rate of 19.5, so you can see how much more the rate is for men who are older, 80 to 84. But even more shockingly is the rate after the age of 84, it goes all the way up to almost 90 per 100,000. So just kind of keep that in mind in terms of, part of the reason that it was so necessary to develop the adult plan. So Annette mentioned something called a soft launch. So let me tell you what that is first of all. So what happened was, as we were publishing our first adult plan, the data in it came up to 2020. But right as we were publishing it, the CDC came out right with the new 2021 rates. And so with that, we wanted to provide a link to those that, those that wanted it, that we didn't want to publish it on the web essentially. So this is not published on the web. It will be after we do, within the next 2 to 4 months, we'll do a supplemental that integrates that 2021 data. But in the meantime, this has been a long time coming, and we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to share it kind of in a more controlled way. So I assume you all, have a copy of this PowerPoint. At the end of the PowerPoint is the link, and feel free to go into that link. In fact, feel free to share it as long as it's not, shared broadly. So again, the plan was developed over a period of about 2 years. And as Annette had mentioned, it involved 130 partners representing 68 organizations throughout the state. The plan was developed by obtaining a great deal of partner feedback. That was via the 130 partners, and then we broke off into small work groups. We also did some surveys and several focus groups. So just like the ASIPP, this is a 5-year plan. And during the first year, which is this year, the initiatives include things like building some of the infrastructure that will really be necessary to proceed with this 5-year plan, including things like developing an advisory similar to the Alliance, contracting with like external evaluators to do the outcomes, resourcing, helping to resource along with the youth plan to resource coalitions, and promoting programming specifically to older adults. I can't see the, does anybody have any questions so far? Because I can't see that box. Okay. So in terms, again, of gathering information, we broke off into, again, 9 small work groups. These work groups were based upon populations that have disparate rates of suicide and/or populations that had been previously underserved. The goal of these work groups was to provide OHA with a literature review with regard to these populations and a list of recommendations. And you can see on your right here the list of populations: LGBTQ2SI+, 18 to 24-year-olds. Let me explain that a little bit, because a lot of people say, well, I thought that was in the ASIPP. Well, it is in the ASIPP, but because this age group has increasing rates of suicide, and because there can be quite a lot of developmental differences between 18 to 24-year-olds, right? This is very much so a transitional age, and so we wanted to make sure and better meet the needs of this group. Construction industry, veteran and military connected personnel. Older adults, people with disability and/or chronic illness, BIPOC, American Indian, Alaska Native, again, focus on men and those living in rural and remote areas. There were some other small work groups. One was the mental health systems group, which was made up of mental health providers, along with those person seeking those services. There was a means group, an equity group, and a lived experience group. So I want to really emphasize the degree to which equity and lived experience was infused from the very beginning in the ASIPP. So the equity group actually came up with an equity tool specific to suicide, and actually Annette and her group are working on updating, making that equity toolkit much more user-friendly. So Annette, when does that come out? You're going to publish that soon, right?
Yes, we're going to get that done by the end of June.
Okay, great. And then the lived experience group, which really came up with really a list of values and principles. And these 2 work groups really took a look at all of these other recommendations that came in from all the other groups, and made suggestions and made sure that the recommendations were in line with equity and with lived experience. In terms of the surveys, there were 2 of them, coalitions and councils across the state. And then there was also the county suicide prevention coordinators. So the other thing we did is several focus groups. We did 7 focus groups, and you can see the populations. We did it in addition to some of the ones that were represented in the small work groups. There were attempt survivors specifically, and persons with housing insecurities. So the YSIPP and the ASIPP uses the same Oregon suicide prevention framework. The pillars, the goals, and the pathways are identical. The thing that's different are the initiatives. And so most of you, I'm sure, or many of you have seen that framework, but I will pull it up when we go into the adult plan, and we'll take a look at that again. It's that framework that's a circle, and it has a multitude of colors. So this is a very large document, and I'll explain part of why that was necessary. It's a large document for several reasons. One is the executive summary sits on top of it, and then there's the main body, and then there's the appendix. Because we did it population focused, we have a section for each and every one of those populations that I just talked about. So each and every one of those populations has its own section devoted to it. And again, there were 11 small work groups. So every small work group got its own section. You know, we don't, the other big thing is that the small work groups had a report that was essentially a report. And in that report, you know, some of them were very short, some of them were very lengthy. But one of the things that I promised the small work groups is that their report would be a part of the document. And so in the appendix, there's an entire section that goes on for probably over 100 pages that is all of the reports from the small work groups that people, if they want to, they can take a look at what the small work groups came up with. That's part of the length too. So we don't, you know, again, we don't expect that people will read the entire report. You know, the good news is that the format is digital. Unless you want a paper copy, you can request that. But the sections are very hyperlinked. There's a ton of bookmarks laying alongside of it. So it's really easy, despite the how long it is, it's really easy to go in and out of and maneuver between sections. Section 1 is really details the state plan. So it, you know, it includes the framework, the goals, and the initiatives. Section 2 details essentially the rationale and the justification for the choices made in terms of the populations that we chose. So section 2 also again details the results of the focus groups, the results of the surveys. It integrates all that for you. You don't have to look at it separately, along with providing extensive information regarding the chosen population, the priority population. And what I mean by that is for each and every one of those populations, you can take a look at all of these things. Well, when available, sometimes it's not available, but there's an introduction and a literature review, and that's again in each and every one of the populations have an introduction and a literature review. And that's great because, you know, it's the most current, you know, lit review. There's an introduction, there's a great deal of data in terms of those populations. So we've thrown all of that together for you. In terms of means and methods, in meaning, you know, means and methods, meaning how the suicide occurred. And then circumstances, when we have that information, public health collects information on the circumstances surrounding the death. And so when that is available to us, and the way it's available is actually by ages. So when that's available to us, we use that. The other thing is that every section, every population has risk and protective factors. Now, the CDC, obviously, and the SPRC has a list of, in general, listed protective factors. But for each and every population, what we did is we added what are the nuances for that particular group. So let's say the 18 to 24-year-olds, there may be some risk and protective factors for that group that, let's say, may not be at all the same for older adults. In fact, they may be in some ways opposite. And so that you have that information for each and every one of those priority population. The other thing is, intersectional identities. So, we didn't want to do this work kind of siloed because obviously none of us are just one of those identities. So we wanted to take a look at identities that may increase risk for each of the groups. We also have, again, in the main body, we have the recommendations from both the small work groups just as they were written. And we also have focus groups when, not every population had a focus group, but when we have it, we also integrate that in. Another thing we do is we look at, for each of the populations, what work has already been underway for those populations, what's already been done, and what's on the horizon for those populations, what's been done, what's being done. And then for each one, we also have a very small summary for you to kind of just, that's a lot of information. So to tie that information together. Any questions before I actually open up the ASIPP? I think that I already, well, here's the link, just so you can see it. Here's the link here, and this is where you can find it on the PowerPoint. It's right here. But I think I already have it opened underneath this. I do. So you can all see the plan? No, you can't.
No.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's okay. In that case, what's going to happen? You can see the plan now?
We're seeing that front page of it.
Yep,
and
yep,
you can
yep.
see the two
Okay.
sides. Yep.
Okay. So let me share with you, throughout this, I won't be looking at you at all. It doesn't mean I'm being rude. It means this screen is way over here. And to fix that, it would take me a minute. So let's just go ahead and hear my voice. So what we have here is, this is it. This is the plan. And you can see here are our bookmarks here. And you can maneuver about these bookmarks. But in addition to the bookmarks, we also have on page 9, check this out, we also have a table of contents. So these are our two opportunities here that will help you. These are your two places you can really maneuver in this document. The third thing is that throughout the main body, there are several links to the appendix. And so let's say you're in the main body and you want to know what the small work group, the entire report, there will be a link there for you to get to the appendix where that entire report will be. So despite that it's cumbersome because of its length, the good news is that it's really easy to maneuver about. So I would suggest that you start here. And because it's so lengthy, we did a paragraph on how to use this document. And here's the table of contents that you can get to really easy. This is on the second page, okay?
Deb,
yeah.
Had someone ask if you could drop the link in the chat, because I think some folks would like to go into the link and follow along.
Sure. Jen, can you do that?
Actually, Deb, this is Laura Sprouse. I've got it. I can put it in there.
Thank you.
Oh, yay. Together, we can do this.
Yes. Yeah, asking me, normally I could. Can I do it right now? No, I can't, because I got too much going on to figure out how to do it.
I got you covered. Don't worry.
All righty. All right, here it is. So I don't know why, but we'll fix this on the revision. But under bookmarks, for some reason the table of content isn't here, which is, I didn't catch that. Again, large document. This thing was actually edited like over 20 times. So, so there are still things in it. And if you notice something, please let me know. But one of the things is you can get to the table of content. You go to how to use this document, and then the TOC is right here. So there it is right here. So this is the table of content. And again, I really encourage you to take a look at it, because it'll give you a lot of information about what you might want to explore. Or if you come in with a preconceived notion of, hey, I want to look at, let's say, veterans, you will know where to get it. So again, we have the executive summary, we have section 1, and again, that talks about building the plan. And in that, you have, kind of a methodology brief. And here's our framework right here. So we go to the framework and we find it right here. And you all, I assume most of you recognize this. And as I said, you look, the pillars are the same, the goals are the same, and the strategic pathways are the same. But what you'll find is the initiatives here are different. So that's what makes the ASIPP and the YSIPP different. These initiatives right here. And so in front here is the 23-27 initiatives. And again, just like the YSIPP, they're color coded according to the pillar. And then behind that is the 23-24 initiatives. And that's where you can go to see what is the plan for this year. So we have that right here. So let's go back. I'm going to go back to how to use the document. I'll go back to the table here. And let's take a look, for instance, at one of the sections. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this link here. You'll see 18 to 24-year-olds. You'll see the introduction data and lit review. You can see that here. You'll see the means and the methods. For this age group, I put right here, males, females, and all. You will see, for instance, the circumstances surrounding suicide incidents. You'll see that here. You'll also see, again, here's one of those links to the appendix. You'll see for a complete list of circumstances, meaning not just this age group, but then there's 2 other age groups. There's adulthood and older adulthood. You can press this link and you can get there and take a look at that. You have, again, 18 to 24-year-old risk factors specific to this risk, intersectional identities. And then here are our recommendations from the small work groups as they were written. And if you want to go to that full report, you can do that by hitting this link, and you can get to that full report if you're interested in knowing more about what those small work groups, wanted to emphasize. Let me go back up here. Again, the table of content is on page 9, but I also want to have you take a look at the appendices. Because again, the appendices are about half of what's in here. And part of the reason it's so lengthy is because of the appendices. So the first thing we have in the appendices are the demographics of the large work group. So we can kind of say, wow, a lot of people were interested in this. A lot of people helped with this, but who were they? Was it really representative of the state? So that's one of the places you can go to look at who worked on this. And then we also have, again, Appendix 2. That's your complete reports from the ASIPP small work groups. Appendix 3 is the focus groups. So we contracted with Lines for Life. So our amazing Alyssa Adair she ran those focus groups and she wrote that report. So if you're interested specifically in those focus groups, you can go into the full report, which is more in depth than what's in the main body.
You know, Deb, I'm just so struck by how useful this could be to any of us who are looking at applying for grants, both national and state, just like what a rich source of data to draw from for that.
It truly is a resource for certain. It truly is a resource and an easy place to go to get information about especially the different populations. It really is. I mean, that's what makes it so lengthy. Part of the criticism is its length, but at the same time, the strategic, section 1, if you're just real interested in that, the initiatives and the framework, that's where you go. But if you're interested in these specific populations, that's where you go. It looks like Laura Rose, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of quick questions if we had a few minutes. So what I was able to see of it, I really appreciate there was a lot of really valuable content, like you say, reflection of the lived experience voice and other perspectives that were included. I really saw that heavily echoed. I wondered when it came, there were a lot of recommendations from these different groups, as I recall. Yes. And so I was just kind of curious in the processing. So was it a matter of sort of selecting, has there been sort of analysis of what we're going to do for 2023 to 24, like on the pragmatic level, the first couple of years, is some of the, as part of the plan, as part of that implementation been prioritized, or,
Yeah,
that kind of thing? And are there any surprises, or was it pretty?
And there is a really, in the appendix, there really is and I don't remember which appendix it is right now, but it really goes into detail about how the plan, what we did with all of that. Because you're right, when I asked for recommendations, I did not put a limit to the small work groups. I did not put a limit on the number of recommendations. And so we got like 6 or 7, 8 recommendations from some groups. And then I got more than 30 from others, right? And so in here, and I'll find out where it is and make sure everybody sees it. But what we did, I laid out exactly how we went from those 265 recommendations to what ended up being the initiatives. Okay, if you're asking if there's some flexibility in the initiatives, there are. Just like there is there are. So, we can change. There are some to be decided. You'll notice that in there, leaving some things open. So part of what we did, we took those 265 initiatives, and then the large work group voted on their top 3 for each section, top 3 or 4 for each section. And then what we had to do is essentially develop a kind of taking a look at a cost benefit analysis, essentially. We had to do that. And then once we had the themes in the themes and initiatives from the small work groups all laid out, that was the point at which the suicide prevention team had to take a look at those and fit those into the framework. So those then had to be fit. We had to figure out where all that belonged into the framework, with at the same time making sure that we kept the intention of the recommendations as they were written from the small work groups. So that was that question. Yeah, that took quite a lot of time for the suicide prevention team to do that, as you can imagine.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting. I'll be curious then to read more and look closer and go through it. Yes. I wondered, in your awareness, are there certain sections where there might be a funding gap? So I've heard that there's like a CDC grant. I heard there was, generally some monies in the past, maybe for older adult, but what about like middle age? What about, some of the other age ranges? And so, where does that leave us? Because we don't know what's going to happen at the legislature. We might have a great plan, but do we have resources to carry it out? Of course, there's the community level resource that's so important. Everybody, coming together
Right.
at the table doing what they can. But, some things do take resources for, expenses. So it would be great to get your feedback or insight as
Yeah,
we go through this first stage.
yes. It's certainly one of the first, I mean, it's part of the first year is to fund, right? And so as there was a POP, the bill that actually you wrote, and looks like it's stuck, right, Annette, in Ways and Means right now, well, along with a bunch of others. We're looking at, so we are looking at, I mean, there is the CDC grant. The CDC grant is 8.5, 850,000 a year, 55 a year for 5 years. And those, actually that grant does focus on older adults, veterans, and rural and remote. So some of these initiatives will be funded by that grant, essentially. And that's why I mentioned that older adults will be a big focus this year, is because we have the money to do that this year through the grant. So yes, so really the ASIPP themes and initiatives from partner work groups, that would be a good place to go to figure out, so how did we, from 200 and what was it, 65 recommendations, how did we equitably and with partner feedback, with a high level of partner involvement, how did we come up with these initiatives? And so that's really the place to go to look at that. We have Megan did a great job of data limitations. Again, the circumstances for all age groups, suicide thoughts and behaviors. That's kind of, I don't know, just some thoughts about that. Risk and protective factors, again, some different ways to think about risk and protective factors, what it can do, what it doesn't do. And then there's rates by counties. So looking at all the different counties and what are the rates of suicide by county, huge reference section, and then a crosswalk with other published documents in addition to some of the terms defined throughout. So the terms defined is a really good place to go if you're not sure exactly what the intention is or what the meaning is. So anyway, that's what I got. Any other questions or feedback?
Well, Deb, it's amazing to see, and of course, it's a lot to take in. And I think I really appreciated your advice around sort of going into the table of contents and looking and seeing where your interests are. I think a document like this, it's easy for it to land on our laps and then to never look at it again. And that would just be such a pity if we did that. And I think one of the things I want to look at, and I want to encourage all of you to do, is possibly having some times where you take a look at maybe a specific section with other people and talk about what the implications of that might be for your community or for your work. And it's something I wonder about, Deb, if there might be over time, if we think about some ways of highlighting and kind of promoting out different parts of the plan so it's a little more digestible to folks. It's
Sure.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Did you see Don Erickson's comment?
No.
Such an amazing piece of work. I've already used it several times, he says.
That's wonderful. I'm glad it, and so many people in this room worked on this. And so, I also, I mean, if I could also emphasize in doing your own strategic plans, the model of how we integrated from the beginning, how we integrated lived experience and equity in this, I think is a really important thing to consider. So it wasn't just at the end, we did it from the beginning by the populations we chose.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
Yeah. That's great. Well,
Any other feedback? Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deb. And before we pass on to Laura Rose, I want to announce something to folks, and we'll be sending you information about this as a follow-up. The Alliance at AOC MHP are sponsoring the 3rd Annual Suicide Prevention Summit, Wednesday, July 26th, 2023. It's going to be a mixed virtual and in-person, encouraging folks to come in person if they can. Portland State University at the Native American Student Center. And, oh, great. And yes, this year's summit focuses on cultural protective factors and using cultural protective factors in suicide prevention for the Black and Indigenous communities. And if you've been to, these are the summits put together by IDEN and 12-6, and they are always led and feature folks from Black and Indigenous communities. And so it's a real opportunity to come and engage both in listening and in really creative conversations with each other about working in these communities. And I just want to read this. I think it's powerful. Culture should be at the forefront of our thinking when we discuss suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. We all come from diverse backgrounds with significant differences that are fundamental to consider in our interactions in providing support, resources, and services. During the summit, we'll seek to understand suicide and suicide attempts within the context of the person's culture, subculture, generational difference, social position, language, religion, spirituality, cultural characteristics, gender identity, values, and beliefs. A lot to kind of think about that can create or function both as risk factors in seeking support for traumatic and emotional disturbances, as well as function as protective factors that provide support and encourage help-seeking behaviors. So this will be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday, July 26th. Really, really encourage you all to save the date if this sounds as intriguing to you as it does to me. And we will send you information out about that. And with that, I want to transition now from having heard about this incredible resource of the adult plan to going into thinking about some real world resources and connections you can do if you have somebody who is stressed or needing to figure out how to better be connected to the right help at the right time. And so Laura Rose Masaras, who serves on our executive committee and has really been our lead on a lot of lived experience issues, has developed Peer Galaxy, and I have invited her to come speak with us about that and maybe about a couple other things as well. Welcome, Laura Rose.
Thank you, Annette. I greatly appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and start a share screen here and talk about Peer Galaxy and some other resources that we have that we link to. I love this quote: even a small group of people can change the galaxy. So, and I love to say our galaxy is big enough for everybody. I think for a lot of people, a sense of belonging is an important protective factor. And, sometimes it's hard, you might not always fit in every group or every setting necessarily, but I think people have a understanding that the context of this vastness of the galaxy, that there is room for everybody and everything, and we all find places and then lots of ways to connect and interconnect and do amazing stuff together. So I started Peer Galaxy. I reserved the domain name back before the pandemic, back in October 2019. I use a wheelchair and I have mobility impairments. So sometimes getting to community events or even support programs and things like that has proven difficult. And so with the advance of technology, increasing access to be able to attend more groups or get support, access support in the home has been really important and vital for myself and others. And then when the pandemic hit, many people pivoted to have support online, remote available. And so we grew the resource called the Peer Galaxy Calendar. So we have 2 links I share up here. And if we want, we can put those in the chat. Peergalaxy.com is the main link to the website, and there's a calendar there. Peergalaxy.com, you can find the calendar on the main page, or there's a link if you want to go direct to the calendar. And so we've been able to catalog and bring together all these different online offerings of peer support, wellness activities, recovery support, and a lot of other great resources like Warm Lines. There were quite a few COVID-specific resources, so we were keeping people updated as those became available. Now we've transitioned, now that the COVID emergency period is over, to more general resources. But it's amazing how many people have stepped up to help one another and to help their communities. One of the things that we also really wanted to find a way to offer was sort of like when you need to connect with somebody right away, really soon, you want to see what's on the menu, what's available today, in the next hour, in the next couple of hours, that kind of thing. And so there's some time-specific offerings that people can access and see what's available in the short term. And there's been a lot of discussion about the workforce shortages and the impact that has on people being able to access mental health services in their community, some facing very long delays. I've heard some groups experience as much as like 6 months to get into a program, or many months to get started with something, depending on how the resources are in the area and some of the other barriers and workforce issues. So being able to have access to support in, as close to real time as possible has been one of our missions. And when we first started out, we didn't initially have it, but today we have offerings around the clock 24/7. And that's really incredible. We get asked, who's Peer Galaxy for? It's really for anyone seeking wellness and recovery. It could be, people experiencing stress, emotional distress, mental health, addictions, co-occurring trauma, loss, grief, some of the challenges of life itself, or people just wanting to improve their health and be protective towards it. With the sharing that's gone on, people were putting information about it in food boxes and in handouts, wearing it on apparel and vests and whatnot, even a FEMA team, things like that. And then we've had other sharing. So as of this month, we've had over 8 million hits, 3.1 million pages delivered, over 700,000 visits. And we now have over 99,000 free monthly offerings and 4 million impressions. So word is definitely getting out. We have also some social media links like on YouTube, Facebook. There's a Facebook group, a Twitter page, and whatnot. So I'll make sure these are available. We also were featured in March with KATU News, who came down and interviewed our team, some of our team members that were able to meet up here in Salem. And if you go to the Peer Galaxy YouTube page, you can see the news story. There's also a link. The anchor, Wesley, came down with her camera person, spent about an hour with us and really talked about the resourcing, did a great story. We've also started offering some online programming as well since probably last fall, where and at other times too, working with other groups doing programming. So like live events, webinars, sometimes events are based on holidays or observances, that kind of thing. One group has started up like for spirituality, people wanting to explore spirituality as part of their wellness. So there's a platform called Hey Peers that I was thinking of trying to bring to Oregon. So other organizations can use this platform and have online activities without necessarily having to have an administrator. They could be supported, partnering with Peer Galaxy. And if you sign up and become a member of Hey Peers, there's many other support groups and offerings that people can access. And if you sign up with Peer Galaxy's links, they also get something called a My Journey tracker. It's free, and people can choose, if you want to track your mood, maybe some of your personal goals, sleep schedule. Some people like to track what's happening with their diet or their activity level, things like that. Really anything you want to, even if it's something pretty unique, you can put that in there and then track it over time. And that's pretty cool. So there's links where you can get the calendar of events that are happening on the calendar inside of Hey Peers. They also have like chat and message forums and things like that. So, and I'll do a little bit of a quick tour after this, but I wanted to make mention, we are super grateful for the visionary community partners that came together from many different parts of Oregon. The Oregon Health Authority, Mental Health Addiction and Association of Oregon has been our fiscal sponsor. People volunteered. So some of the organizations, the peer-run organizations that had staff, dedicated their staff to help us start building Peer Galaxy, like from Folk Time, Oregon Consumer Survivor Coalition, and the Oregon Mental Health Consumers Association, and others. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and go to the website. Any questions so far? Or comments before I switch?
So, Laura, there is a question about, wait, somehow my chat just moved, so I can't see it now.
Okay.
But
Well, one of the things I don't know that I emphasized is that we really only list events that are offered online or hybrid so that people can attend online, or if it's a hybrid, they can join a live event. Also, only events that are free or that offer scholarship. So
and
those
here's
are
what,
kind of some criteria.
here's what Kelly McWilliams asked: who owns the data that individuals tracked, and is it sold, stored anywhere accessible to third parties?
Well, that's a good question. So Peer Galaxy itself, they're not tracking data in Peer Galaxy. If an individual puts their information into the Hey Peers system, then my understanding is they own that data, like the individual, that's their data. There's, like, we don't have access to it. The other people don't have access to it. I mean, so if you took your information and you chose to share it with somebody, that's your choice, but not any other third party sharing, to my knowledge. So, yeah. Sometimes people fill out, maybe like, I think sometimes they fill out evaluations like, was this group helpful or not? Then that information might be, kind of shared anonymously. It'll say, this group has 4 stars or 5 stars, something like that, with a rating system. But your personal data, to my knowledge and understanding, it's your personal data. So I hope that answers. Any other questions? Is that just the one in the chat?
You got a wow,
So-
Peer Galaxy is amazing. Thank you for sharing this with us today, from Renee Kessler.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, great. Let me do a quick tour. And how are we doing on time? I don't want to.
We've got about another 10 minutes. You need.
Perfect. Okay, great. So this is the landing page for Peer Galaxy right now that we've had. And so we say, welcome to our humble beginnings for great destinies. And we share a little bit about what peer support is, give links to the calendar. We have a couple of features on the website, which are on the right, there's a pink button with a figure in it, and that opens up a menu of accessibility tools. People can change things like fonts, font sizes, contrast. It has profiles for different types of needs. Anyway, it's pretty amazing. So that's one resource on the pages. Another one is on the lower left corner, and it's the Google Translate button. And so far, most of the feedback we've had, I haven't heard any complaints so far. Most people find that it does a pretty good job if, they need to have the site translated into Spanish or other languages. So it may not be perfect, like, down to idioms or, culturally specific, phrases that are particular to one particular culture or background, literature style, whatever. But in general, like the basic information about events and times and all of that, it seems to do a really good job. So then we have, so people can click one of the buttons to go to the calendar, and we have 2 calendars. The original calendar was designed for people to be able to use on their smartphone devices, especially during the pandemic. They were a lot of people, as people that were displaced, luckily they were receiving smartphone devices that they could use for information. And it's been a pretty important topic with all the things happening with health these days. It's really, the digital divide issue is a really big issue for a lot of our older adults. And so we're working on having more offerings specific for addressing that. We also champion, there's some supplemented or free tablets, telephones, telephone services, or discounted services that people can access. So this first section brings up a calendar page with, we have a couple of hotlines and warm lines, chat lines at the very top. The one in particular that is always at the top of the calendar is the SAMHSA Disaster Distress Hotline. It operates 24/7, weekdays and weekends, has multiple languages, TTY and other access. There's also, a lot of people aren't familiar with it, but there's a group that does online through video sign language, American Sign Language, and that's also available for emergency and crisis, as well as for non-emergency and crisis. And so we list those at the top. And then after that, it gets into some of the resources, especially things that come up. So a lot of times when there's a major event, there'll be some resources that are specific, like families and children facing tragic events, things like that, that have specific resources people can open up. And then it gets into events that are all day events. So sometimes we have different resources, like the 12-step programs, like you might have heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, some of these groups. And they have so many groups. It's fantastic. They have hundreds of groups, every day, 7 days a week, running, many hours around the clock. And so rather than list those out individually, which would require someone to do a lot of scrolling, we bundle those events. And so we call them bundled events. And so those are often listed near the top. And then it'll open up and people can choose. They'll say, like, you can enter a zip code, or you can look by time of day, those kinds of things. So, for example, here, find a meeting in Oregon, Alcoholics Anonymous in English and Spanish, hearing impaired. So there's a lot of information on that page that you can expand and go through to find different ways to find the meetings, and then get the links to go to those. So we also have some that are all month offerings. Alateen, and many, many others that are going on. So those are kind of at the top. And then after that, we list the ones that are time specific, etc. So this is the basic original calendar. Then we've been able to offer, but we still keep the other one because it's faster for some people. But the 2.1 version that you can go to, it has more features, and it has these like quick links. So you can go and say, I want to check out the warm lines or events for adult or family or caregiver, young adult, webinars, training, special events, consumer input opportunities. Also, a lot of great ways to elevate and lift people's voice to get active and make a difference. So time specific are the ones that'll come up, and they'll be the ones that are, what's happening right now and in the next few hours. And then the first, if you're just scrolling through and you don't go to one of those quick links, it'll start with the all offerings, kind of the comprehensive view. It's called a poster board style. People can change the way that it's laid out to what they prefer. But this one is the one that people voted that they liked the most. And so we kind of lead with this, where it has a little picture, tells you some information about the events, kind of like looking through classified, like the newspaper or something like that. A lot of people enjoy that. Then there's some at the top, there's these different, what they call filters. You can choose by category or who's organizing the event. So if like you want to go to an event that's by a certain group, you can click on that and it'll load the list and you can choose in there. Or there's tags for the events. So, if you're looking for an event that deals with grief or maybe a dialogue, a 12-step, things like that. So those tags are in there. Venues is often used, like if people want to know, is it held on Zoom, go to meeting, is it telephone accessible, things like that. So those are there. And then on the right, these different changes you can look at, like what they call a stream view or a tile view. And so, maybe it's more text and less image, or some people like the boxes all to be even in a tile view. Other people don't mind it if it changes in height. So we usually leave it on there. If you like certain events, in this new calendar, you can add them as favorites. There's also a way you could have the events like export to your calendar that you chose. You can also click on sharing of the events and share them like on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. So just a lot of resources. And then in addition to these, we have a resource link in the menu. And I wanted to mention a couple of other great resource sites. So 211 Info has a lot of great resources that people can visit their website and say, I need to look for food, or I need to look for shelter, I need to look for mental health support, things like that. So they have a nice website. And then there's this newer one that is the Oregon Youth Resources Map. And I definitely encourage people to take a look at that one. Oops, it looks like it's not coming up right now. Let me try something and see. So this is, they use .com instead of .org. We'll fix that. So this one here, the Mapping Collective. So this one has specific resources by type, similar to what we were mentioning with 211, like housing, mental health, health and wellness. This one will give you a map of how many there are in what part of the state. And then they also give you a description of how to access some of those resources here on the left, like a phone number and a website and a description and stuff like that. So it's really helpful if you're looking for resources. You can also use these drop downs, depending what part of the state you're in, like Eugene, Beaverton, if you're looking for a certain age or maybe a special population, and then also cost. So this is a resource that's outside of Peer Galaxy. And so some of its resources may come with, requirements for like insurance or other kinds of costs, but it's something that we share from the Pure Galaxy webpage. And then lastly, I wanted to take a minute and show the, one more too, not to leave out, is Aging and Disability Resource Connection of Oregon. This has a lot of resources for people with disabilities and for older adults. Really great resource. And then there's more on the page. Let's see, the other one I was going to show is the 988 card. So we've been sharing a 988 card with the mobile crisis teams that are up and coming with many different folks. And so it's a foldable business card, and it has a QR code that will take people to this specific page, and it gives them information. If they have questions about 988, they can read what some of the materials are. They also get information on alternatives to 988. So some people, might really have a preference. There's, for example, Youthline, where you can be assured that you're going to be able to call and talk to a youth if you call at certain times of the day. So we have about 50 different numbers listed here by topic. So like for youth and young adult support specifically, there's even a really cool one called Love is Respect. There's ones for parents, there's ones for caregivers, ones for domestic violence, ones for very specific cultures, ones with interpretation, and much, much more, veterans and so on. So that's what we call the 988 page. And the cards that we give out, they take people to this page. And then it also has some really supportive messages on the back, a place on the inside they can write what an emergency number is or what things soothe or support them. And also some of the basic numbers if they don't have them, plus some general reminders. Like I've heard this thing, never make a decision when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. But anyway, thank you for letting me share.
Is that something that you're encouraging folks to print out and use in their local coalitions or with their local efforts to share that card out?
Yeah, definitely get in touch with us. We have a webpage, we have an email on all the web pages. It's called webmail@puregalaxy.com. If you're interested, and let us know, and we'll try to get you some of the cards. They're really useful. And then just being able to share that link as well is helpful.
Thank you so much for this incredible resource. I wonder if folks have any questions about using it, or I'm also curious if there's any ideas in the group about how you could see this being useful to you.
There's just so much here. In fact, while you were talking, I just texted the associate counselors that I supervise to let them know about this resource for some of their clients. Thank you, Laura.
Oh, you're very welcome. What I've heard from some people is that, they're using it, with like case management and stuff. And so it's actually helping them help more people faster because, they're able to show them this resource and give them, a head start how to navigate it. And then, people are able to, we find most people spend an average of 6 to 10 minutes on the website. So they usually look around and find something. And my friend says, if you have a pulse, you can find something on Pure Galaxy. It's pretty broad how many offerings are out there really for, many walks of life, many different circumstances. Specifically for suicide prevention, there's a few regular provisions. There's a group called Alternatives to Suicide. There's also a group called Suicide is the Language of Pain. And there's some other ones that are open for people that are struggling with suicidality. What we offer in our programming isn't a therapeutic support group. like along those lines as a direct service, but more of what we call a community meetup with peer support so that people can connect and have a safe space to share and do work together. But some of the resources and offerings that we feature in the calendar of Peer Galaxy, you know, they're facilitated by people that have very specific training and ongoing oversight and support, those kinds of things. So that's a clarification.
I also just really want to acknowledge, Laura Rose. I feel like we have a lot to learn from you about disability access. It was really powerful to see the different ways that you thought about disability access, everything from different kinds of, you know, whether folks are neurotypical or not, to sight, to just all the different angles to think about. And I know you built that in from the very beginning around this. And I guess I take it as a challenge because I feel like we have a long way to go before we really figure out how to make everything that we do really accessible. And so I'm going to be poking around Peer Galaxy sort of with those eyes as well about how do you make something more accessible?
Definitely. Well, and if you find, you know, opportunities for improvement, we're lifelong learners and on a journey of continuous improvement. So thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Hey, I didn't open with this, but I just want to appreciate you all for being here today and being part of this. And it's just incredible to be part of this kind of community of folks who are all leaning in together to really try and create a better world. And to see, when I think about the ASIPP and I think about Peer Galaxy, they're both very comprehensive, ambitious kind of projects that I think give us a real opportunity here in Oregon to move out of being one of the states where they say there's the worst mental health resources and instead being a place where people can thrive. So with that, give you a big 5 minutes of your day back, and we can bring this to a close. And Laura, maybe if you want to hang on here with me for a minute, that'd be great.